Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Benjamin Sanchez, and I'm an attorney in Houston, Texas. I'd like to thank the Houston Bar Association's Law Practice Management section for allowing me to present to you today on the topic of investing in your team for better client service. Now, what qualifications do I have to give this presentation to you? I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself so you can understand where I'm coming from. I'm a 24-year attorney. I'm actually going into my 25th year of practice. And I've worked for a couple law firms, but for the past 15 years, I've been on my own. I've had as many as 3 associates and a dozen staff, and as few as just working for myself. At the present time, I have 4 staff and myself. One of those is a paralegal, I have a litigation assistant, I have a client services director who also acts as my legal secretary, and I also have a receptionist. So I have a team, and I have built teams throughout the life of my career. So what does investing in the team have to do with better client services? Now, I have to be honest with you, I did have a full presentation on the slideshow ready. But as you can see from the screen, I'm presenting just the title because for some reason the PowerPoint is not working with the recording software to get this to you. I had wanted to present this live, but one of my clients at the last minute told me that she actually had made a mistake on the trial date. And so while you're watching this, I'll be on my way to court to get ready for a trial. But luckily I do have the paper backup of my notes, and so I can definitely get through this presentation without the power slides. So the goal as a law firm owner is to have better client service, because when you have better client service, you have happier clients, and those clients will allow you to get more business. Without that better client service, things can go very wrong in one's career. Well, how do we get to that goal? The method is to invest in your team, but not everyone really knows what investing in your team means. And this is what I would like to discuss today. So I'm going to give you a sort of an overview of what I'm going to talk about, and then I'll break those sections down and talk about each one. So the first one is to actually have a team. As much as we like to go solo, the more people you have, the better work you can do. The more work you can do, but also the better work you can do. So clearly, I think number one is to have a team, even if it just means one person helping you. I saw this Facebook post last night from an attorney who's been practicing 50 years, and he showed a couple pictures of his office, and he was lamenting the fact that he just worked all the time, and just, it was a never-ending cycle. And some of the comments that he got were that he really needed to get a team, because if he had a team, he would actually be able to produce better work and have more work-life balance. So we'll get into that a little bit more. So one is to have a team. Number two is to think about the benefits for your team. So we are in an age where a lot of small firms are not governed by the federal employment laws. However, that doesn't mean that we should just treat our employees as basically 1099 people, or even if we take out their taxes, that we don't get the benefits. Not everyone can afford the full benefits of a large company, but there are some benefits, and you can be creative with those benefits, and I'll talk about that. Number three, professional development. Just because we are attorneys and we're used to these kind of CLEs doesn't mean that our staff also cannot have some professional development. And in fact, if you invest in the training of your staff in terms of their professional skills in whatever it is that they do, that will help you and your clients tremendously. And I want to go over what we mean by professional development for non-attorneys. Fourth is personal development. Now, I'm a big believer in personal development. I'm a constant learner. I also teach it, but I also learn. And I really believe that as individuals, we can grow a lot and through personal development. So I think that we have a tendency to focus on ourselves, but we should also care about our team's personal development in addition to their professional development. Number 5 is relationships, and there are different kind of relationships that I want to talk to you about when I go over this section. But I think developing good relationships is key to investing in your team. And then the last thing I'll talk about today is called servant leadership. And that is basically a style of leadership that ingratiates you with your team. That's called servant leadership, which means not just, directing from the top down, but being a part of the team and kind of being that servant leadership so that your team can follow you. They can emulate you because they see how you're doing. So I definitely want to talk to you about that. By the end of this presentation, I hope that you will understand that a well-developed and happy team leads to happier clients and more business. So with that introduction, let's sort of get into the 6 topics that I've talked about. One, again, is to have a team. Now, if you come from big law firms or even medium-sized law firms, you may be used to the fact that there are different types of staff and different types of personnel for specific functions. As a small firm or solo attorney, we don't necessarily have that luxury. But I do encourage everyone to at least have one person to help you, because it becomes much more difficult for you to do your job when you are doing everything. If you can at least unload the administrative functions of your work onto someone else, that would help. If you can also unload some of the substantive legal work onto an associate or a paralegal, that will go even further. Ideally, you want to have someone helping you with your administrative work and someone helping you with your legal work. How far beyond that is really up to you, but if you can at least have one person, if not 2, helping you, then your work will be so much better, and it'll just make a world of difference in the quality of your work, in the timing of your work, how you produce your work, whether you meet deadlines. Going it solo, while it has its appeal and creates low overhead, it may create low overhead in your finances, but it's going to create high overhead in your mind. We talk about lawyers having high depression rates, having high rates of alcoholism, having high rates of suicide. And that is because we have so much pressure on ourselves because we are constantly representing other people in basically battles, whether it's a transactional battle, whether it's a courtroom battle, or a mediation or arbitration. We're constantly the gladiator in the ring, and we do little to help ourselves to take care of ourselves. And so having a team will allow you to take some of that overhead out of your mind and put it someplace else. It is difficult to sometimes justify to ourselves whether or not we should spend the money on something like, staff, when we just like working from home, or we like the freedom of being on our own, or we don't necessarily want to manage people. And I'm telling you, as a professional, if you can have 1 or 2 people at least helping you, then things will be so much better for you and so much smoother for you as well. I highly encourage you to get a team. One person to take your administrative work off, one person to do the legal work. If that happens to be the same person, fine. But if you can get 2 people, at least do that. If you can't answer your phone, I would not suggest answering your phones either. Your team does not necessarily have to be someone that you hire that's in your office. I'm not asking you to create a big office just to house a team. So for a while, I had a virtual assistant, and that was just a company that answered my phones. That's all they were, virtual receptionists. And I gave them a script, and they followed that. And that was one service that I didn't have to do anymore. That was something else that was taken off of my brain power and allowed someone else to do. Once I hired the virtual assistant company, and then once I set up the script, they were allowed, that company was allowed to handle the calls in a way that I knew was going to be consistent every time. And in fact, I had made it a rule that I would not take any calls, because that company could not forward any calls to me unless it was a court or a judge. Everyone else would get a message, and then I would return their calls, whether that was clients, leads, opposing counsels, whatever. If it was a court staff or a judge, then they were allowed to put that call through to me to see if I was available to take that call. Otherwise, they had to take a message. Just doing that one simple thing, just having that virtual company that got paid once a month on a flat fee for what I needed them to do, was the beginning of my team, at least this time around. So that was, you could do something like that. Have a team that will very much help you. Excuse me. All right. The next topic I want to talk about is benefits. Now, benefits is a scary word to a solo or small firm attorney. I get it. We're not in the position to compete with the big boys when it comes to benefits. We think of 401ks, we think of insurance and all sorts of things. It would be nice if we could provide all of the big firm benefits to our employees, but as a solo or small firm attorney, sometimes that's just not possible. So what I suggest is to be creative with your benefits. There are some benefits that you can give that have nothing to do with big law firm benefits. And let me go over a few of those. One of those is going to be simply paid time off. I know it's strange, if you have someone working for you on a 1099, then you're probably wanting to check the rules on that, but you're probably only paying them for the time that they actually work. If you really want employees to embrace working for you, you have to recognize that there are life circumstances that come up, and people, you don't want to put them in a position of having to choose between coming to work distracted or not being able to work and being pissed off because they can't make money, because they're not getting paid if they don't work. How much time you give them is really up to you, and how you divide that time is really up to you. Now, years ago, I used to have separate vacation, and then I had separate sick leave. And what I found was that, there were people who were calling in sick who really just, wanted a day off, or they wanted a vacation, they had planned something with their family, whatever the case was, but they were using sick time instead of the vacation time. And, not only should they not have to lie to me, but, that was just creating a distance or a barrier between my staff and me. So a few years ago, probably within the last 5 years, I've changed to just straight PTO, paid time off. I don't need to know why it is that you're asking for the time off. You don't have to sit there and try to make an excuse as to why you need the time off, but I will give you time off. In my firm, I give 80 hours of paid time off, which is 2 full weeks every year. When someone starts, however, I make sure that they don't earn the full 80 right off the bat. So the way I do this is I always have 2 reviews within the first 6 months. They have 1 review at 3 months, and then they have 1 review at 6 months. These reviews are designed to give them better feedback and quicker feedback. It also allows me to have some sort of probationary period so that the team member understands, that they just can't, sort of sit back and relax. Not that they do that, but they can't sit back and relax just because they got the job. After that 6 months, then we give an annual review on that anniversary of the 6 months. So the way I handle PTO, or paid time off, is I allow them to have 20 hours. So even though they have 80 hours for the full year, they don't get access to 80 hours right off the bat. They get 20 hours for the first 3 months, and then they get 20 more hours in the second 3 months. Now, they don't have to use that 20 hours in the first 3 months if they don't want. They can save, their 20 hours, and then they'll have 40 hours in the second 3 months. Once they get to 6 months, then they are allowed, the other 40 hours kicks in. Technically, if they haven't used any hours, then when they reach 6 months, they'll have 80 hours at that point. That is just one way of doing it. There are all types of ways of doing paid time off. I would urge you not to cringe at the idea of paying someone time off, even though you're a small employer. It will go a long way to endearing yourself to your team members to actually have paid time off, because they're used to, they may be used to not having that. And that paid time off is in addition to whatever holidays that your practice has. And again, I encourage you for those holidays to make those paid holidays. We were going to talk about sort of relationship building and servant leadership later, so I want to get into that. But it does wonders to allow people time off to have a work-life balance, and to allow them to appreciate the fact that they work for a place that recognizes that there should be some time off. Just like you shouldn't have to work all the time, you shouldn't expect your staff to have to work all the time. So paid time off is one of those benefits that you can do. The other one I kind of briefly mentioned was the paid holidays, so you should definitely do that. I think the other benefit that, is, I use the term benefit, but it could be, however you want. It could be work-life culture, whatever, but giving people respect at work through how you have their environment or their working space will also be a benefit. There are a lot of employees who, for law firms, who are cramped, who are, just their workspace is reflective of what you think about them and their position. You may not realize it, but I'm telling you, when someone works in a condition that, they're in a tight room, or they're off in a corner or whatever, you might think of it as they should be lucky to have a job. But they're going to look at it as the place they work and whether or not they feel appreciated at their work. So I would suggest that you create a space that is desirable to work in. And whether that's, one office that you and your team shares, or whether you give them a separate office, how you give them in terms of supplies, what type of computers do you give them. There are benefits of having newer technology that actually works. You don't want your team member to be upset because you have old technology and you just want them to deal with it. I'm not saying you have to have the greatest and latest technology every single year, But to not have, maybe 10-year-old computers or 6-year-old computers that have old software that don't allow them to keep up with the times in terms of doing the work. If you give them a good environment to work in, that actually is a benefit that team members will appreciate, especially those who've been around a while and have seen different environments. We may not be able to give them big law firm luxury, but we can at least put some thought into how we arrange their workspace. Okay, so that would be another benefit. We can look into, I think another benefit that you need to think about is paying. Now, a lot of times small and solo firms like to basically use employees as 1099 people, not worry about taxes, not have to try to figure out taxes, and just say you deal with it yourself. First of all, you can't really do that under the IRS rules, but many attorneys do that and they do get away with it. But second of all, I think most employees appreciate being able to have, some consistency in their paychecks, and also having those paychecks done properly. Okay, so I think that how you handle your payroll is sort of another benefit, and so I would do it consistently. I would do it with taking taxes out. Now, for a while, several years ago, that meant that I had an app on my phone that allowed me to figure out the taxes. And so I would just put in my clients' exemptions or whatever, and then I would, put in their pay, and then I would figure out the taxes, and I would handwrite them a check that had less the taxes, right? And so then I had to deal with the taxes on my own, but they got a check that had taxes taken out. And then they also got, they got a paper check. But as I've evolved in my career as a law firm owner, I've realized that the better thing to do, and it's really not that expensive, is to use a payroll company to actually do the paychecks for you. You just report the time and the hours, and then they will take care of the taxes based upon the deductions that the team member wants. Furthermore, they do direct deposit. Many team members do not want to deal with having to take a check and then go to the bank and try to cash that check. So again, another area of benefit is how you pay people. So you pay them, every week or every 2 weeks. You pay them taking their taxes out. You pay them, through direct deposit. And you do all that through a payroll company that you may think is just for the big boys, but they have very, financially good plans and fees that allow you to do that for your employees. Right now, I don't have health insurance for my employees. I'm looking into it, but that is just not a benefit that I can really confer at this point. I need to make sure that when I interview anybody who wants to have a job with me, that they understand that we are small, and that our goal is to have insurance at some point, but we're just not there yet, and they have to be very comfortable with that. So we try to make up for that, with their work environment, with how we pay them, with giving them paid time off, and trying to, I think the last sort of benefit that an employee can have is how you are as a boss, right? There are a lot of people who get other kind of benefits, but then have a crappy boss or a crappy work life. And you'd be surprised at what someone would be willing to take if they just had a good place to work. So that's the topic of benefits for investing in your team. The next topic is professional development. Now, quite frankly, for me, I would include professional development sort of as a benefit, because what I tend to do is I tend to want to pay for my team's professional development if I can. The larger the team, the more I have to budget that, and the more I have to account for, how much. So the smaller the team, the more I might allow that one person or two people to, pick whatever professional development that would be good for them, obviously with my approval, and to pay for it. The larger the team, the more I have to think about maybe setting a budget per year. It might be $500 per year per team member, but I will pay for up to $500 of professional development. That also means, though, that I want to encourage professional development, and I think that you should encourage professional development. Someone on your team should keep up to date with whatever skills they need to help you effectively do your job. If you have a paralegal, that paralegal should have some professional development, and there's tons of professional development for paralegals. They have their own CLEs, they have bar associations or paralegal associations that are set up for them. There are paralegal sections of bar associations. So there's sorts of professional development that can go on for paralegals, and I think that we think most of the time that is what we talk about. Sorry. But your team members who are not attorneys and who are not paralegals can also have some professional development. Professional development doesn't necessarily mean just professional. It could mean that you allow your receptionist, who may not be able to type all too fast, to take a course on how to type faster. It may mean that you have people take sort of grammar courses. There are all sorts of educational providers out there that will focus on administrative skills. So you can do that. You can have your team also, take some Westlaw or Lexis or other type of legal research courses. You can do that. You can also allow people to take, let's say, junior college or community college courses that don't cost much, and they can take a course to increase their skills. I definitely encourage professional development for all team members. Not only does it help you, but it gives them a sense of belonging and importance in your firm. In other words, if you have the receptionist or the administrative assistant sitting there looking at the attorneys and the paralegals increasing their skills and becoming better because of the professional development, they're going to sit there and they will like the same thing. Assuming that you hire good people who have some grit and ambition, they're going to want to do the same thing with their lives. And so why leave them out? You should have a atmosphere of professional development within your firm, and you should do what you can to make it happen. Now, sometimes people don't know how to look for those kind of opportunities. So it's not just a matter of saying, well, I'm going to allow you to do professional development, but you got to figure out how to do it. Okay? You can do that, and at least that's better than nothing. But if I were you, I would invest in your time, even just on a weekend or whatever, figuring out ways that your team can get professional development skills and experience and education, by whatever method might be available to you where you're at. Obviously, in a big city, there may be more things to do, but quite frankly, with the internet, there are so many things that are online, so many different types of courses that are online, that there's no reason why they can't develop their skills. And also, some of the things are just going to be free, but you have to allow your staff the time to do it. So, for example, my firm uses a practice management software called MyCase. I've been using MyCase for myself for over 10 years. I was one of their early adopters, and I've stuck with it as they've grown. Now, what MyCase does, and what most software companies do, is they have tutorials on their support website. Okay, so I encourage my staff to regularly look at those tutorials. A lot of these companies also have sort of regular training days, maybe once a month or whenever, when they come on and they teach their customer base about something with their software. As much as possible, I like to get the team together to watch those together. If it's a live presentation, we can go into the conference room and watch those. If it's, we don't have a conference room, then watch them on our computers. When someone starts, I make sure to let them know that I want them to go to the My Case Support website and look at the My Case 101 video. I forget how long it is. I think it's less than an hour, maybe 30 minutes, but it's some sort of basic overview of my case. And rather than just, I want them to learn, and that will make them a better team player. They really know how to use my case, rather than just saying, well, this is what we use, figure it out. No, I want them to watch those videos, and I'm not going to be upset when they are watching those videos. In fact, I make it mandatory that they watch at least the 101 video, and I tell them about all the other videos that they can watch as well. Okay, so when it comes to professional development, just think about all the different ways that your team members can become better at their job and increase their skills, because the more skills each team member has means that they can rotate and take on different positions whenever someone's out, someone's sick, someone's ill, all sorts of things. And, the better they are at the skills that they have, so they provide you and your clients with better service. So think about professional development for your team from the top down. I can talk to you all day long about, professional development for yourself through CLEs and other things, and I think that we tend to think that, I guess paralegals can have some professional development as well. But every member of your team should have an opportunity for some sort of professional development, and there are all sorts of ways to do that, even if it's just sort of skills related to life and not necessarily exactly to their job. And that gets me into the next area of investing in your team, which is personal development. Now, I am a columnist for a national legal magazine. I sit on the editorial board of the GP Solo magazine, which is the official magazine of the American Bar Association's General Practice, Solo, and Small Firm division. And in that magazine, I am a regular columnist. My column is called Ronin Reports, after the samurai of old, but it's called Ronin Reports. So it's sort of like field reports from a solo perspective. And in that column, I talk a lot about not just the nuts and bolts of a law practice, but I talk about mindset. I talk about personal development. I talk about a lot of things, habit forming, all sorts of things that may not have exactly something to do with, what we do for clients per se. But I'm a strong believer in personal development for myself, and that carries over into my team. So, we have professional development that we think of as skills for work, but then we have personal development, which are, skills for life, for your personal life, that if they become better, if your team becomes better personally, those skills will transfer over. For someone to start a habit, whether it's a health habit or, any kind of habit that they want to do that may improve their life, that's ultimately going to help you and your clients. So I definitely encourage people to do these habits, these personal development skills. I look for ways for my teams to enter into those, whether it's online, whether it's taking particular courses, reading books. One of the things that I do now, that I just started a few months ago, is I have a sort of a law firm book club. Now, what that means is that I have a small enough team where I can buy these books for my team members, whether it's on Kindle or just actual paperback books or whatever. But I have a book club that is voluntary for my team. What's not voluntary is that they get the book. Okay, but what is voluntary is that they read the book or they participate in discussions. There's a whole separate, when I started this, I got a lot of feedback from different attorneys and HR people about whether I could force a book club on my employees, because that's how much of a believer I am in personal development. And based upon the feedback, even though I think I can, I decided that what I would do is I would make the opportunity available, and then I would have a culture of making sure that we could discuss the book. We might go out to lunch once a month and talk about that month's book, or we might have something in the conference room regarding that. But that every employee would get a book each month, based upon what I've chosen, and they will we'll be able to discuss that. And at the very least, they get used to the idea of having a new book per month, and hopefully they'll get into reading that book. And the topics I choose are going to be things that are interesting to me, and I think would help also my team members. So, for example, see, I don't have it right here, but for example, the first month I did the book called The Four Agreements. Now, the Four Agreements goes into kind of 4 different things that you should do that's recommended in your life for to have a better life. And that's a very good book, very popular. And so I bought a member of the Four Agreements for my team, and that was the book that we read for December. In January, I bought Joy at Work by Marie Kondo, I believe. And so that's, just talking, Marie's a big clutter-free kind of person, and making your space more enjoyable to live and work in. And so she's really more focused on the personal side and the home, but she did write a book called Joy at Work about how to bring those same principles into the office. And so I got each one of the team members that, because again, like I said before, a good working environment can actually be a benefit you can provide. And so teaching people how to make their environment work for them and be enjoyable, I think, is important. So that was our second book. And then our third book, the one that we have for this month, is a new book by Donald Miller called Hero on a Mission. And it's about, how to look at your life in a way where you create your own story. You become the hero of your own life movie. And it's sort of a perspective of how to go through life and, have more out of your life rather than just thinking that everything is drudgery, right? And so that's the book we're reading this month. I have an idea what I want the next book to be, but I haven't chosen it yet. But those are the kind of things, in terms of personal development that I believe in. I believe in trying to teach skills for people that will allow them to develop personally, so that they become better people, and then they become better people, they become better team members, which leads to better client service. So I would definitely look into personal development that could be separate from, professional development. And personal development, you don't necessarily have to pay for that. You don't have to buy people books like I do. You don't have to pay for personal development courses if you don't want to. You can combine your budget for professional and personal development if you want. But I think you should be reminded that sometimes professional development is not just the be-all, end-all of our training in life, especially for employees. So I think you have to take professional development and personal development into hand to develop your team sort of as a well-rounded person. So that takes care of personal development. The next way to invest in your team is by good relationships. Now, there's going to be a lot of opinions about what kind of relationships you should have with people at work. Some people are very family oriented and they want their team to be sort of not only their work team, but they want to have a personal life with their team. And then there are some who are just like really standoffish and basically say, look, work is work, personal is personal, we're not going to mix the two. But there's a way to develop relationships no matter how you have the structure of your relationships. There's a way to develop those relationships so you can have good relationships with people. If you are a work-only kind of person and you really don't want to mix your personal life or your team members' personal lives in the office or in the firm, that doesn't mean that you have to be sort of standoffish at work or uncaring about what someone goes through. Okay, if someone takes, for example, PTO because they have a death in the family or because they're ill, it doesn't mean that when they come back that you don't talk about and inquire about and show sympathy and caring for whatever situation they were going through. It doesn't mean that if you can find out, you might want to have some flowers delivered to a hospital room or to a funeral home. There's ways to develop relationships even at work that create a caring, that foster a sense of caring and empathy and sympathy, and knowing that your team member is going to know that they work for someone who actually cares about them and about their situation. Now, the more personal you get with people, the more you're going to sort of draw to that naturally anyway. Relationships also, I think that in the 80s, in the 90s, there was this big thing on team building, right? And what does team building mean? Team building, some people thought, well, team building is just sort of like professional development, right? But the whole point of team building exercises really is to create relationships with people. It may be one way to inculcate the team into the firm's culture by teaching them about the firm's culture and all that. But we could do that without having sort of a whole team building exercise per se, right? The whole point of team building exercises was to develop relationships. But you can't just develop a relationship, one time and then let it go. So what happens in a lot of larger companies is that they pride themselves on their team building exercises in the beginning, but then when they get into the office, after those exercises are done, there's no indication that the superiors care about the employees or that they really honor the relationships that they built during the team building exercises. Some people may continue to do those once a year. Some people may do it just at the beginning when someone starts off at work. But it's not about just building some relationship in a designated event and then letting it go during the office. There are people who have all sorts of personal things or group things that go on for a firm. So for example, you may have a firm dinner. You may have a firm bowling night. You may have a firm outing at Topgolf or batting cages. You may have a weekend trip, kayaking or hiking or whatever. You can have those exercises, and that's great, and I think that's part of, potentially building good relationships. But good relationships go beyond, sort of formal exercises that you do. They go into how you care about someone on a day-to-day basis, how you recognize and remember, the things that are going on in someone's life. Now, the bigger your team, the more that may be impossible, but then you have to delegate some of that to people who are below you. But everyone in your office, I think, would be better if they felt valued and cared for and listened to as a person. And part of that is done through building good relationships. So, you know, you may not be able to have a personal relationship with, depending on how large your law firm is, you may not be able to have a relationship with a file clerk or a receptionist, but then you should make sure that someone else does. In other words, no person is an island in your firm, and that's the point of good relationships within law firms, is to build camaraderie and to build a sort of a safety net so that people understand that they are cared for, that they are valued, and that is done in part through good relationships. Now, sometimes attorneys, take it too far, and there's this thing about doctors dating nurses and lawyers dating paralegals, or whatever the case may be, right? But so there may be a fine line as to how far you should go in developing a relationship with your staff, but it doesn't mean that you have to be cold with your staff either, okay? So I think that developing good relationships will really help you. Now the final thing, the final of the 6 things I want to discuss today is called servant leadership. Now leadership is basically, that's a buzzword, and it can mean a lot of different things. There are a lot of different types of leadership. There are people who micromanage, who feel like, well, here's the thing. Some people believe that leadership is a title. Some believe that leadership is just a function of authority given to them through their position. My thing is that leadership is really not a function of a title. It's really about authenticity. It's about trust. It's about leading someone regardless of what position you're in. A few years ago, the big thing in leadership was being a 360-degree leader, which meant that you could lead from where you're at for people all around you, from the top down to the sides. That you could be a 360-degree leader no matter what position you were in. And while I believe that, I certainly think that there is something to say for the person at the top, whose name is on that firm, who may be in leadership in a leadership position in that firm because of authority, to be a good leader. I like to espouse the idea of servant leadership, which means that you should sort of be a servant to those you lead. I've given presentations at various universities around the country, and I talk about this idea that I first learned through John Maxwell. And John Maxwell is a former pastor who became a business guru and management. If you go to any Barnes & Noble, you'll see a lot of his books. I'm actually certified to teach his material, but I first heard about him almost 30 years ago when I was in law school. But one of the things that he teaches is about a leader is not about me, it's about we, right? And a leader who has a team, but finishes a race or, comes first, is not really a true leader. If you want to be a true leader for your team, you want all of you to go together across that finish line, or better yet, you allow your team to go before you because you are serving them. There are ways to be a servant leader while still being in command of the ship. Okay, that doesn't mean to give up your reins and to basically do whatever it is that your team wants. It's a way about conducting yourself that, again, inculcates relationships, inculcates benefits and professional development and personal development, and caring enough about your team to not overwork them. So have a team. But servant leadership really is about going forward and talking and demonstrating that you are a servant, and by your actions your team will see that. They will see that you care about them. that you want to serve them as much as you want to serve your clients. It's not just about a top-down approach, but it's sort of about a level playing field approach. It's about you sort of leading by design, by example, and not just by authority. There are entire books about servant leadership. I don't really want to get into all of the facets of servant leadership, but I would encourage you, after this presentation is done, to maybe pick up a book about servant leadership or read a news article online about servant leadership and see how you can take the ideas of that kind of approach to running a law firm and make it work for your team. So these are the 6 benefits that I wanted to discuss today. And so again, have a team, have some benefits, invest in professional development, encourage and invest, if you can, in personal development. Make sure that you have good relationships and encourage good relationships with your team members, not only with you and your team members, but between the team members themselves, okay? It's not about everybody having just a good one-on-one relationship with you, but it's encouraging people to have relationships around each other, because they can also then be their support network as well. And then being a servant leader. I have found in my career that when I have a team who is invested in, that team performs better for me, and ultimately that results in better client service. If I can have better client service, then I know that I will have more business, because, as we've all learned, referrals or word of mouth are the best kind of referrals. Client referrals, even better. In this day and age of reviews online, you want to have good client service so that you can get good client reviews. Good client reviews will get you better and more clients. There have been so many times that I've had people come to me and we ask them, every time we have what we call a lead or a potential client come to us or call us, we ask them, how did you come to us? How did you find out about us? And oftentimes, besides having referrals from other clients and attorneys, when they look online, they will tell us that, they saw several attorneys online, but we had really good reviews. There were other attorneys in our field, in our geographic region, who do what we do, but they saw the good reviews. Okay, Nick, we can have a whole separate topic, a whole separate presentation, and maybe we'll do that later this year or next year on how to get good online reviews. I mean, what's the process, right? They don't come just out of thin air. You actually have to encourage them. But if you can get good client reviews based upon the fact that you give good customer service, then you will end up having better reviews, and then those reviews other people will look at, and those reviews will not only lead to better business and more business, but they'll lead to other things, because whether you speak at CLEs, whether you write articles or whatever, you'd be amazed at what other people look at before they consider you for a position, whether it's employment or whether it's volunteer work or whatever. In this day and age of the internet, good client reviews mean a ton, and you don't get those good client reviews, and you minimize the bad reviews by having good customer service. So if you can build a team, if you can invest in your team, you would have better client service. So I think that's really what I wanted to cover today. I'm sorry that the slideshow didn't work. Something happened, but those are the things. If you want to discuss any of these things with me, you can just go to my website, sanchezlawfirm.com. You can send me an email. I'm not going to give the personal email on this particular presentation, because it'll go online. But you can definitely look at my website. You can give my office a call. We can talk about any of the things that you have. I'm also developing sort of a training company that's separate from my law firm practice. That's just part of what I do. I'm a constant learner and I'm a constant teacher, so I enjoy doing these kind of things. With that said, I thank the Houston Bar Association's Law Practice Management section for inviting me to speak on investing in your team for better client service. It's February 8th, 2022. I wish y'all a great new year. I hope that you had a happy new year so far, and that you have a very successful and productive year ahead. Thank you. Goodbye.